I feel like in the last 5 to 10 years, especially, that ADHD has become very, I'm using air quotes, trendy to be like, oh my gosh, I'm so ADHD. And to be honest, that's a little bit of a pet peeve of mine because while those people might mean well or they're just making a lighthearted joke, they don't realize that attention deficit hyperactivity disorder is just that. It's a disorder, and it ravages people's lives.
Welcome to The Ownership Game with Gary Montalvo. What would it take to get into the driver's seat of your life and leave your mark? The Ownership Game starts now.
Throughout the course of my life, I've often suspected that I have ADHD. I never thought much about it because it didn't seem to interfere with my life in any significant way. I just chucked it up to, that's just the way that I am, and I developed strategies to manage all of my quirks. So for example, I never keep track of things in my head. I know that doesn't work. I make sure to write everything down in the same notepad so that I can always find it. I always pad my timelines to compensate for the times that I'm likely going to spend getting distracted by other things. Instead of spending a lot of time trying to change these things about myself, I just embraced it, and I created a bunch of these rules to help me manage my behavior. This has really worked in my favor for the most part. I've been pretty successful in life, and that I've mastered those workarounds is even part of what makes me a great coach. But recently, I started to really wonder just how much harder am I having to work? Is there some value in me exploring this deeper? Could the quality of my life significantly change if I've tapped into some of the many resources that are now available to me? So I went hunting for someone to talk to about this. For weeks and weeks, I searched until I found my guest today, certified ADHD coach Ryan Mayer. I think I was being so picky about who I invited on the show because ADHD is sometimes used as the butt of many jokes. It's often trivialized and simplified as hyperness and lack of focus. But the reality is that for many of us, it's much more challenging than that, and it can often wreak havoc on people's finances, careers, businesses, and relationships. When I found Ryan, he stood out to me in his ability to create a safe space, one where you realize that you're not alone. And in fact, you're in pretty good company. He also happens to be hilarious, perhaps because of his ADHD or perhaps despite it. That I will let you decide. I thought a good place to start would be at the beginning. Let's start first with what is ADHD? What's the deal with it? Because I feel like a lot of people, it's become a cliche in some ways to just fill in the blank for anyone that feels hyper or scattered or, squirrely. But there's some real stuff going on underneath the hood, right? So why don't we start there?
For anyone who's just listening, with me being a certified ADHD coach, there's from the movie Up, it became famous that the dog who can speak says squirrel, and that those of us with ADHD are very distractible. So when my son brought home a little Valentine that said, "Love you, Dad," and it's a squirrel, I'm like, this is going right into the backdrop of my office.
Love it.
So anyway, but yes, I agree, Coach Gary, that I feel like in the last 5 to 10 years, especially, that ADHD has become very, I'm using air quotes, trendy to be like, oh my gosh, I'm so ADHD. And to be honest, that's a little bit of a pet peeve of mine because while those people might mean well or they're just making a lighthearted joke, they don't realize that attention deficit hyperactivity disorder is just that. It's a disorder, and it ravages people's lives. And so, yes, certainly everyone at some point is going to get distracted or lose or misplace something, or maybe they get lost, or run late to an appointment or something like that. But when it is a chronic challenge that is pervasive throughout all areas of your life and causing financial issues, relationship issues, job challenges, that's when you know it's real.
Mm-hmm. What So how are their brains working differently? I mean, I know you're not a medical professional, so I don't mean to put you on the spot about that, but obviously you have personal
No, it's okay.
experience.
Yeah. And it's funny that I was using the announcer voice earlier because in some of my webinars, when I talk about the basic brain science, I always preface by saying, Coach Ryan is not a certified medical professional. The following is from lived experience, and he is not a doctor. With that being said, though, I can give a pretty helpful overview because Dr. Russell Barkley, who's one of the prominent researchers in the ADHD space, I just want to show off my new background to be able to say, see, here's his book. The way that he describes it, I think, is really helpful, is that essentially with the evolution of the human brain, to obviously super simplify it, the back of the brain is for where we store what we know. So the back of the brain is for where we know stuff. Mm-hmm. The front of the brain is for where we do stuff. And that's the newest part, evolutionary wise for the human brain, like the frontal lobe. So right now, for example, our son, my wife and I have 3 kids. Our oldest son, who is 6, he just got diagnosed with ADHD. And scientific research shows that the cognitive development of someone with ADHD is going to be anywhere from 3 to 5 years slower than someone who is a neurotypical peer of theirs. So our son is 6, so he could be anywhere from like a 1-year-old to a 3-year-old as far as like his behavior. Mm-hmm. But as we get older, it's the same kind of thing where some people who have ADHD might be viewed as immature or something like that because they're, maybe a little more silly, for example. But anyway, the way that Dr. Russell Barkley explains it is you might know what to do, but you can't get yourself to do it. And so that's a problem, obviously. Like one that I see a lot with my clients, I was just texting some of them this morning, is about taxes. Now, again, let's get back to the whole fad of ADHD. No one enjoys doing taxes. But for someone with ADHD, it's extremely hard to be okay, to just wrap your head around, how do I take the steps? The way that I explain it is if you've ever taken a shower in a place where there's very low water pressure, you can still get clean, but it's just going to be a lot harder and it's going to take longer and be very intentional. That's sort of how I think of the neurotransmitters like dopamine or norepinephrine in our brain of someone with ADHD. The signals might be sending, but they're just not as strong as someone who does not have ADHD. So when that's I just think that's a really easy way to see it is someone else can shower in 10 minutes, let's say, but that's because all of their chemical messengers in their brain are getting the message through. Whereas for us, we really have to try and expend a lot of energy to get that same message across to our brain.
So the first thing that comes to mind when, I have I work with a lot of people. I've had the honor of coaching a lot of people. It feels like this is a more common thing than I think we realize. So either I think my takeaway is are more people than we think have this diagnosis. Well, they don't have the diagnosis perhaps, but may have the condition.
You're spot on because again, research cites, and this is Dr. Ari Tuckman talks about this, that while anywhere from 4 to 5% of the world's population might be categorized as someone who is neurodivergent with ADHD, up to 80% of the people who have this kind of brain wiring don't know it yet, or they don't have a diagnosis. So imagine just people go through their entire lives thinking, well, I guess it's just harder for me to do these things. Where if they, like, my hope is that with the work that I do, I can spread awareness enough that people might go, hey, as my uncle would say, I resemble that remark, where they start to see themselves in some of that and maybe explore getting a diagnosis.
Yeah. And I completely identify with what you just said, because it's one of the reasons I wanted to speak to you, because I myself am one of those people that have often suspected that I was ADHD, but I kept justifying it in some way. I was like, oh, I'm an artist. Oh, I'm visual. Oh, I'm creative. So when you go to art school, you're kind of conditioned culturally that we're oddballs and that we just are different beings. And I, for a very long time, that was the reason why I had a hard time with structure, or wanted to stay up late and work through the night, and couldn't get any work done during the day, and couldn't remember details unless I wrote them down. Oh, I'm visual, I need to see them, and those types of things. But if I when I see a video, when I see a TikTok, I'm like, huh, that's interesting. That, when you read one of those articles that are like, you might be ADHD if you have, I'm like, I do a lot of that stuff.
It reminds me of when I got my diagnosis when I was back in high school. As I was reading through the description of, some of the traits of someone with ADHD, I was just mentally like, check, 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 check. Like, yeah, that sounds very familiar.
Yeah. And the part that really stood out for me is because, look, obviously, I'm a coach, so I've run large companies. I deal, I've developed the ability to stay focused and get things done and be very successful. But the thing that stood out for me is how much harder am I working to get that stuff done, right? Like that was the part that really had me want to talk to you, because I'm like, how different could my life be if I had different strategies, different resources available, or if I had a name to call this thing and then had the appropriate support to support the thing that I'm calling, right? ADHD.
Well, I'm so glad you bring that up, because I think an important clarification is that people have this misconception that people who have ADHD are unable to focus. And I mean, even the name itself, attention deficit. It's not that we can't focus. It's that our attention is variable, and it depends on what it is. That's why, for example, let's take being an artist. I'm sure, Gary, that you and a lot of your other colleagues in your art school, when you're doing the thing that you love to do, it's like the rest of the world probably fades away, and you can hyper focus on those things. And that's one of the reasons that I feel I'm a great coach, is because just like I told you in our introductory call, that when I am with my clients on a call, they are my world. Like, I don't let anything else in. The challenge for most people is finding a environment where they can be really engaged with what they're doing and be getting compensated for it. Because a lot of things, for example, like video games or other reward-seeking behavior that might be risky, like, ooh, I love driving really fast. Or, for example, since we're dopamine deprived, a lot of people will have challenges with substance abuse because it sort of fills in the gap, and like, wow, this feels really good for me. Whereas someone else might think, yeah, that's pretty good. I'm feeling buzzed. For other people with ADHD, it might be like, wow, this is really good, because they don't know what it's like to feel that stronger water pressure normally.
What I wanted to go back to your diagnosis and tell me a little bit about what it was like for you growing up, and the moment you realized that, and the difference that made for you.
It was really nice to know I wasn't broken and I wasn't I wasn't doing it wrong, so to speak. And I'm very blessed. My entire life I've had a very supportive family and great like teachers and everything like that. So it wasn't ever that I didn't have a support system. It was just that we were starting to realize as I was going through grade school, like, okay, obviously the material, the curriculum gets a little more challenging, but it seemed like, because I went from like the gifted group, again, I'm using air quotes, to just like, whoa, I need like remedial help pretty quickly. And in high school, I always remember I played sports in high school. So, we'd come back on the school bus from wherever we were, and we'd be changing out of our uniforms back into our street clothes and then come out. And this is before I could drive, so my parents come pick me up. And my mom would always ask me, what are you doing in there? Like, what takes you so long to just go change? Everybody else is coming out. You're the last one. I'm like, I don't know. I'm just talking, I guess. But we noticed that it was a similar trend. Like when we were going on a family trip, Ryan's always the last one out the door. When I was taking tests at school, Ryan's always the last one to finish. And it was never intentional. I was never going slowly. I was just trying my best. And it was like, man, this is just strange. So with my academic struggles and just seeming like I was always finishing things last, we decided to explore it. And it was I always say this with my clients is that it was equal parts relief and regret. Relief because it's like, okay, there's an explanation for why I feel this way. But then, especially for those who are diagnosed later in life, in their 30s, 40s, 50s, I even have a client who was diagnosed in his 70s. There is that piece of regret of, man, what could I have done if I would have known about this earlier? So I would say that's how I felt. It was a mix of relief and regret.
You get diagnosed or you suspect that you may need to get diagnosed. Walk us through some of the steps that someone should take to begin this journey.
In my social media, which I know Gary's going to share some of my links, but I now have over 500,000 followers or subscribers across the various platforms with my ADHD _coach_ Ryan. And I think what a lot of people come to me and they're asking these questions like, hey, where do I start? Because your videos are explaining my life. And I always obviously go back to the funny disclaimer about, well, hey, I'm not a doctor. I can't diagnose anyone. So that's why I put together, and there's plenty of these out there. So, you can just Google it. But on my website, I have a self-assessment form where I took a lot of the things that are on what you would get at a doctor's office. And I did that because a lot of times people aren't sure how to bring it up to their physicians or their medical providers. So I said, hey, fill out the survey, and that way you can have some talking points. But the easiest way, just like step by step, is call your doctor. Just set up an appointment, set up a phone call, and talk to them about some of the reasons you think you might have ADHD. They can interview you and take you through a few assessments. Sometimes they can do it just purely based on a talk about family history and just kind of day-to-day symptoms that you may see. And then they can also forward you on to a specialist, and then that person would speak with either a psychologist, a nurse practitioner that specializes in mental health, or a psychologist or a psychiatrist, and then they may or may not prescribe some sort of medication to help the person. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about medication. That was one of my questions. Like, what's your, philosophy on that? Is that, does everybody get medicated? Is it a personal choice? Can you,
totally
talk a lot about that?
And I just had a voice in my head from my friend Caroline, who is a therapist, super talented therapist, and I'm a huge proponent of therapy. And I forgot to mention that entire group of people. So Caroline, if you hear this, I'm sorry. So to go back to the last question, you can also talk to your therapist, who can also help to get you diagnosed. But as far as medication goes, again, I tell my clients, I am neither pro or anti-medication. I am pro whatever my client feels is in their best interest.
Mm-hmm.
So same with all the listeners, that it's a personal choice, personal journey. I had a certain, it wasn't even a philosophy, but a perception of what it was like, because the only thing I knew in grade school was the myth, I think, that kind of still has lasted through till modern day, that ADHD only exists in grade school boys who can't sit still,
Mm-hmm.
which clearly is not true, because someone is born with either ADHD or not ADHD. But my only experience was when there was the rambunctious kid in my grade school class who, when he couldn't sit still and he was knocking his desk over and disturbing the class, would have to go to the school nurse to get his certain medication. And when he would come back, was sort of had a glazed look, and he was just sitting there quietly. So I can remember saying to the doctor that actually diagnosed me, I said, "Hey, doc, I'm not interested in medication because I don't want to be a zombie." And she said, "Ryan, let me ask you a question. If you were sitting in class and you were trying your best to see the board, but no matter how hard you squinted, you couldn't see it, would you get glasses?" And I thought to myself, well, kind of a stupid question, but yeah, I would get glasses. And she said, "Okay, well, this medication is going to be like glasses for your brain." And so when I thought about it that way, that it would help to really bring things into focus for me, I decided, you know what, I think I should take this journey. And I'm really glad I did, because when I did take the medication, it totally leveled the playing field of chemicals in my brain so that I could focus on the things that were important. Now, again, everyone's going to have a different experience.
Mm-hmm.
But going back to Dr. Russell Barkley for a second, I want to just quote what he says about medication, because it's so profound to me. Because a lot of people say, well, I don't want to take medication. I want to do it the natural way. And I say, hey, you do what you want to do. You do you. But here's what he says. Why it makes sense to try medication. Medication works. When people ask me why they should try medication as a way to manage their ADHD, my answer always comes down to those two words. It's because ADHD medications, and this is like, okay, everyone, if you take nothing away from the episode except this, it'll be worth your time. So listen up. That's because ADHD medications are the most effective treatment currently available for mastering your ADHD, period. Mm-hmm. These medications are more effective for this condition than any other psychic, what would you say, like a brain medication or any medication for any condition. So I'm not saying that exactly right, but, and then he says, we know now that ADHD medications can normalize the behavior of 50 to 65% of those with ADHD and result in substantial improvement, if not normalization, for another 20 to 30% of people with the disorder. So anyway, to go to the other side of the argument for a minute, our son just got diagnosed with ADHD. So we are trying the same medication that I'm currently prescribed, but we're finding for him it's not really working. So it's also a journey that you're going to have to continue evolving what you try to see if it works.
Is it when
That's all I've got to say about that.
when you are, if you go the medication route, is it like done, or do you still have to manage your ADHD with other strategies as well?
Mm-hmm. No, that's nice. That's the nice part about it. You pop a pill and all your problems are gone. Congratulations, everyone.
Okay.
No, actually, I always say that certainly the pills don't bring the skills. Mm-hmm. So yes, it may normalize some of the neurotransmitters in your brain, but that does not mean that your problems magically disappear. Sure, it might help someone to not get as easily distracted, but the way that I like to describe it is, imagine you have a a boat where you wind it up and you just drop it in the water and it goes blah, 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 and it goes through. You can tell I have 3 little kids that have a lot of bath toys. But basically, you can think of ADHD medication as the same way. Like, it'll help you to focus and stay on course, but you still have to decide what you're going to aim your focus at. And that's where the management comes in. Like, okay, now your medication is going to help you focus better. What are we going to focus on? And that's a lot of where my coaching comes in is, let's talk about what you want to try to get done.
You just set me up lovely, because that was going to be my next question. I wanted to start to get into how you work with coaches. Because, I think the interesting thing that I want to just prefix that question with is a lot of times, not just ADHD, but people in general, we're working with people and they have these opinions about how they are. And that they are fixed somehow, meaning I am this way. And in my experience, it's mostly, well, no, that's just how you're trained, right? There's mostly the things that we want to acquire, the skill sets, they can be acquired through just training and development. If you just actually, so I imagine a lot of the work that you do it falls under that category, right? Like just retraining yourself to work certain things that the way that you are, it's not fixed. It's what I want to just let people know, because, so yeah, let's dive into that.
I couldn't agree more, because it's easy to see why some people might feel some learned helplessness, because many times those of us with ADHD can come along with, as I call it, the bundle pack that you never knew you ordered. So you might have ADHD and it comes with anxiety and depression, which makes sense if you think about it, because the depression comes from all of the failures that we've experienced in the past of people telling you, no, you're doing it wrong, or why you do it that way. Why can't you remember when I tell you something? And then the anxiety of, oh no, like I don't want to do that again. I don't want to let people down. I don't want to fail. So with that in mind, people are they're scared to try something new because they think they might fail again. Every day I send a question out to all of my clients, and today's question, Coach Ryan's question of the day. What action would you take today if you were given a guarantee that it wouldn't fail? Because a lot of times I think, and you know this as a coach too, we have to tell our clients, we have to empower them with an answer that they already have. Like they already know what they should do, but once they get that confirmation and the encouragement and the push from us, then they go, okay, yeah, that's what I was thinking, but yes, I'm going to definitely do it now. So that's how people start making change. You just have to break out of that behavior pattern that has become automatic and we haven't even noticed.
Yeah, and in my experience, you really need a structure to break you out of that.
Exactly.
We have so many resources now. We have YouTube, we have, books, we have the internet, but those things don't break you out of a pattern of behavior. They're information, they can be useful, but I find you need something to interrupt and take you out of the business as usual, like working with a coach, like signing up for a program, like doing therapy, like just something that forces the conversation and takes you out of the normal day-to-day routine to now begin the work of actually causing the change. Otherwise, the muscle memory is just too strong the other way around.
Right. And even I had a conversation with a prospective client yesterday. He's a father of 2 beautiful kids, been married for over 10 years. And he said, Ryan, I've read all the books. I've tried all the different solutions and I can't get myself to do it. So I need someone else to help me. And having the courage to reach out for help, that is the key ingredient to get it started. That's the spark to the ignition, because he knows just having someone, and I tell my clients, you're going to get out of this what you put into it. So like you're not going to log into a call with me and I'm going to solve your problems, obviously, but I will help to give some perspective and then help them to commit. And the way that I describe coaching is, it's like when you're a little kid and you go bowling and they pop up those bumpers on the side, like those little guardrails. I say that I help my clients I'm just a reminder of who they said they wanted to be and what actions they said they wanted to do. So I'll just be sort of those guardrails where when they start to drift off course, I go, wait a minute, didn't you tell me that this was important for you? And I tell the clients, like, it's like bowling because I can't throw the ball for you, but I'll give you a structure to plug into. You have to be the ones to pick your goals, which are the pins, and then the ball's in your court. You have to actually take the action to get the results you want.
If you are dealing with ADHD, what are some of the top, couple of strategies that you find are really effective to improve your productivity?
One of my phrases, I'm like looking at my office door right now, and one of my Coach Ryan isms that I say is, little hinges can swing big doors. So if you think about huge doors, like on the front of a gate, or on the side of a gate, I mean, or like a huge mansion door or castle door that opens, the hinges don't have to be that big in comparison to the door itself. So little changes can really have huge impact. So what I tell people is, you already know what you want to do, but maybe you haven't chosen where you want to start yet, or what are the little steps. So I ask my clients to send me each day, what are 3 things that they are committed to finishing that day? And it could be as grand or as little as they want. Sometimes I'll have a client and, say something like take out the trash, which to someone who is neurotypical, they might say, oh, take out the trash. I'm going to pay you money to help me take out the trash. And my smart ass reply to that smart ass remark would be, yeah, if you're my one client who's on her own because her parents passed away, so she didn't get some of the life skills, and she has 15 bags of garbage from the last 2 months sitting by her door, then yes, I'm going to help somebody to overcome that challenge.
One of the things that I love about you, I found you online and I immediately fell in love with the content that you were putting out, because
thank you.
It's very obvious that you have a deep, profound love for people and for what you do. But the thing that I really connected with you on is that you just have this way of making everyone feel okay and normalizing, there's nothing wrong. And that's something that I often find myself saying to my clients or saying when I'm training. I'm like, there's nothing wrong with you. Stop messing with yourself. Like
Yes.
We all have something to manage, and if yours is, you can't, you have a hard time getting organized. Okay, we'll work on that, but we're not broken. We don't need to be fixed. There's nothing wrong with you. We all just have things that we're working on. And that was really obvious in the way that you work and in your content you created. And I just thought it just felt like such a safe space. And that's why I really was like, this is my guy.
Well, I know that we connected, and in about the first 30 seconds, we were both laughing, and we both knew, I think we're going to be friends for a long time, because we were just laughing and having a great time. So it really means so much that that you could feel the authenticity and the love behind my content, because when people ask, why did I even get into this business? It's because I know how much it hurts to continually feel like you're a failure. And what I want to help people to realize is your job doesn't define your worth as a human. If you didn't fit in that job, that just means that wasn't the job for you. Or maybe you just need to make a slight adjustment on how you're approaching the work. And I'll help them and help organizations to figure out what accommodations can we make so that our employees can be really leaning into their strengths instead of trying to always fix the weaknesses.
Yeah. And I think, the interesting thing is that I feel like we are moving more and more towards this evolution of an ADHD brain. I think we never in the history of the human race have we been so overly stimulated. We have where attention is constantly being fought for. Our devices are constantly beeping. I'm not certain. Again, I'm not a scientist or a medical professional, but I'm not certain that the future doesn't look more like this for more and more people because of the way that we're just conditioning our brains. So I think it's an important conversation to have and to pay attention to, as this keeps evolving, because it's not like all of a sudden we're gonna get quiet and unplug from our phones anytime soon.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because my wife and I, we were just traveling this past weekend. We had the chance to go down to Florida. We were in, where were we? Fort Lauderdale area. And in the airport, I was just looking around and everybody seems to be looking at their phones. And don't get me wrong, I was also. But it's funny how, to your point, we're so hyper connected, but yet it isolates us at the same time. So that's why it's so important to build those genuine connections. So yeah, I agree with you. It's not going away. That's for sure.
Yeah. Let's go back to the job, because that's kind of been an area of focus for you in helping ADHD folks navigate the workplace. So what are some of the common struggles that you're seeing with people in the workplace, people who have ADHD?
Do you know who Usain Bolt is?
Yeah. The athlete? Yeah.
Do you remember what event, like what kind of event he does?
He was a runner. No, like a sprinter?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's the word I was looking for. Sprinter. Can you tell me, 3 or 4 of the world's top marathon runners?
No.
Me either, because let's be honest, it's kind of boring. No offense to any of the long distance runners out there. But the reason I bring that up is because those of us with ADHD, we're wired to be sprinters. So we do really well in high stress, high stakes, urgent environments where it requires quick thinking, being very dynamic, being creative, taking innovative approaches. And where we tend to struggle, and again, that's a generalization because some people can be different. Everyone has their own flavor of ADHD. But the long, like for example, with me, I really struggled with long-term sales cycles. So if I was selling something that was tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars to a company, I really struggled staying excited and engaged with the whole process. Whereas when I was younger and I was working in a retail setting or working in like a very quick interaction, maybe over the phone that was more transactional, I really thrived in that environment because it was fast-paced. Like you had to get to the point. So a lot of times people will struggle with mundane administrative work that doesn't always give that hit of dopamine. And again, going back to that explanation of the brain earlier, we might have it in the back of our brain that we know how to do it, we know it's important, but if it doesn't engage our attention, it's going to be really hard for us to be like, yeah, I'm going to go log those reports now. Yes. So then basically what I work with my clients on is, okay, even though we may not enjoy doing the reports, if we know that they have to get done, let's explore some ways that we might be able to get there. So we can either try to find some accommodation where maybe we could do a little bit of job sharing and maybe someone who really, I don't know why people are like this, but they might enjoy doing reports and analytics. But they might want to take on some of that for us, and we could take off of their plate some of the more client-facing or outward-facing things that they don't enjoy doing. So there's definitely some creative approaches that I talk to companies about, or I talk to a work team about, because I think a lot of times people are so stuck in the way, that's how we've always done it here, that if they're not open to considering more dynamic, creative alternatives, they're going to miss out on some really talented people.
Love that. And you have a program that you've created to help people through the work environment, no?
Yeah, so I have a couple. One that I'm really excited about. It's a text message based program. Speaking of being on our phones, because I was trying all kinds of different ways to connect with my audience. So I had a video course, and then we looked at the analytics. Well, my IT person did, and told me people would drop off after like 3 minutes. And I'm like, okay, a 45-minute webinar is not going to work. I should have thought about that. So there's that. And then I tried signing up for like a master class, but that was just too much. Like 6 weeks. Are you kidding me? So what I ended up coming up with was a 10-day long text message based course where you don't have to sign up. You don't even have to create a password. You just pay, and then it automatically comes to your phone. And the course is called How to Find Work That Works for Your ADHD Brain. And it's really cool because it takes a lot of my own lived experience and what it took me 20 years to figure out, and I boil it down into 10 days worth of digestible nuggets. And then the really cool part is you have some concrete takeaways where I actually have like printable PDFs that people can write out, like what are their strengths, what are the things they really enjoy, what action do they want to take coming out of the program, so that it's not one of those things where you get a really cool binder from the event and then you just put it on a shelf and it collects dust.
Well, when I saw, I was like, a text, I'm like, that's so smart. I was like, and the idea of no password just really just sung to my heart.
Spoke to you. Yeah, exactly. Because how many times, and again, I know that this is a universal thing. It's not just for people who are neurospicy or neurodivergent, but when people are like, where did I put the password? Like, why didn't I use the same one I use for all my other stuff? I don't know, but now I got to.
Because they made you choose a different one. That's why. Because they said you cannot.
Yeah.
You need a different special character. Oh no, not that special character. The another special character.
So that's a text message based course, and I want to offer to the listeners that they can get a 30% off discount on that.
Woo!
So there's that, and then obviously I do group coaching as well for folks that want to have that on more of a continue basis, where they could be in a group of people who finally get it, who can relate to them. And then also this is a really exciting kind of initiative in 2024 for my team and I, is we're actually going into workplaces now and helping organizations, helping enable them to better support their employees that might have invisible disabilities. So companies have come a long way with accommodations, especially for people that might have physical disabilities, but it's much tougher to know how to support someone if all of the challenges are inside of their mind.
Yeah.
So I brought in some experts to be able to help them, the companies, figure out some easy ways that they can leverage the skill set of the people that are already on the team.
Yeah. No, I think it goes back to what you said earlier. It's the perception with ADHD is often that they're immature. You know, like they just, it's often misunderstood just how difficult it is to navigate some of those challenges, and the perception is often like they're just not being serious, or they're not applying themselves, or they're not doing the work, and so I think very often they struggle in that environment. He's looking for another prop, I think, right now.
You're right. I am, because as one of the things, this is like a great example of just knowing how our brains work. I'm doodling a picture. That's something that you said to me earlier kind of inspired me to make. So maybe once I finish it, I'll send it to you.
Okay.
And it could be my piece of art for Coach Gary.
If you're listening to this podcast, you probably want to go watch it on YouTube because there's definitely a lot of props happening throughout.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Well, I think I know that we just started to skim the surface of this conversation. I think if you're listening, what I really want you to take away is that there is nothing wrong with you, and there are plenty of resources out there for you to learn the skill sets that you want to learn. And some of us have to learn how to focus more, and some of us have to learn how to connect with people, and some of us have to learn how to, be more creative, and some of it, it's just, we're all learning things. And when you approach it from that perspective, there's just a freedom that comes with the journey, and learning requires freedom. You can't learn something and evolve while you're judging and beating yourself up over the fact that two things can't occupy the same space at the same time. So definitely connect with Coach Ryan. He's an amazing resource. There are I'm putting in the show notes you have 3 gifts that you are giving the listeners. One of them is a 30% discount. If you want to have a coaching call also with Coach Ryan, there's a link there for you to connect with him. And then there's the assessment that you had on the site as well.
Yep. And then I also I'll share with them too, Coach Gary. I'll share with them just a PDF resource that I give a lot of my coaching clients, which is the top 10 ways to skyrocket productivity at work. And these are things, again, it'll go back to that little hinges swing big doors, that if you try some of these things, it's not rocket science, it's not stuff you've never heard before, but it is ways that if you start doing them and you build up that habit, you build up that muscle, you're going to start seeing results.
Yeah.
But I'm just so grateful that you saw my content and you gave me the chance to come on to speak to your listeners. And spoiler alert, this will not be the last conversation between Coach Gary and Coach Ryan. Tune in on next episode to find out what funny things they will do next.
It better not be. I literally told him in the pre-interview, I was like, dude, we have to be friends after this. I was like a little kid in the playground. I was like, can we be friends? You're so cool.
And we have been. And I guess here's my piece of parting advice to everyone, which actually goes off of that comment, is life is too short to have jobs that you hate. And it's okay to have fun. For so long in my career, I was masking my true identity and being much more serious and buttoned up. And it's exhausting. And I just decided, you know what? I'm not going to do that anymore, because you're allowed to have fun at work.
Yeah.
As long as you get the results, it's okay to do it. And in fact, it's easier to do it when you have fun. Boom.
That right there.
There it is. If this microphone wasn't so expensive, I would drop it.
No, don't do that. All right, Coach Ryan. Until next time, so appreciate you joining us. Thank you, friend.
My pleasure. Talk to you soon.
Yes. Over the last decade, the subject of ADHD has been mainstreamed. This has been great for the number of resources and support that has become available. But I think we still have quite a bit of work to do in understanding the impact and complexities of ADHD. People living with ADHD are too often the butt of jokes, or categorized as lazy, undisciplined, and just not applying themselves hard enough. It's just often not seen for what it is, a disorder. The result can be devastating for those already struggling and incredibly frustrating for those around them. But I hope that after today's episode, you see that with some honesty, creativity, and a whole lot of love and compassion, ADHD can be managed. Here are some tips to get you started. First, manage your mindset. Don't engage in internal conversations of, why am I like this? What's wrong with me? I can't do that. Those conversations are limiting in nature, and they reinforce a false narrative that something is wrong with you. Instead, remove the judgment and get creative. How can you find a solution to this problem? How can I make this work for me? What support or structure or systems do I have to put in place to help me achieve my ultimate goal? We often think that we're a certain way, that we're fixed and can't change. This belief is also very limiting. History is full of examples of people who defy their limitations. Instead, take on an approach of, how can I train myself to do this? How can I learn this skill? Create a training program for yourself that takes you step by step through learning this skill. Lastly, work with what you got. If you're not a morning person, plan your heavy work in the afternoon. If you know that you're forgetful, then just write everything down. If you know that you're likely going to get distracted, then find some strategies to help you through that, like taking short, scheduled, structured breaks. You can spend your time fighting it because you read somewhere that so-and-so does it this way. Or you can just say, this doesn't work for me. I'll have to do it this way in order to make that work. And just move on. ADHD is manageable, I promise. But you have to do some work and learn some strategies. And you'll probably have to undo some of the self-judgment that you've probably picked up along the way. That's where working with someone like Ryan will be incredibly helpful. Don't forget to check out all the freebies and resources that he's sharing with you. You can find those in the show notes. Lastly, if someone you know in your life has ADHD or you suspect they have ADHD, cut them some slack. Stop judging them, stop making fun of them, but really support them, work with them, try to find creative ways to solve the problem. If this episode was helpful for you, please let me know. I'm still getting to know what you guys like, and your feedback is incredibly helpful in helping me guide the show. Till next time, I will see you next week.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Ownership Game with your host, Gary Montalvo. Make sure to like and comment on your favorite podcast platform, as well as subscribe so that you never miss an episode.